Philomythia podcast.
Let's
Here we are. Number 3 already. Feels like we just did the first episode.
was that a Queen song you were just singing?
I was just singing.
Well, I thought it
It's
was
not
from the
anything.
Highlander soundtrack thing.
It's probably
Here
what-
we are.
Oh, nice. It's probably just a calico of concepts and memory just mashed into an
Right.
ugly clay ball, and it just comes out as gibberish
How do we ever know?
from my mouth. Yeah. Well, hello, dear listeners. Welcome
Hello.
back to our special little Small Pants podcast.
Well, I'm Ian,
I'm Eric.
and this is the podcast. What's the name of it?
Philomythia podcast. Or the
Philomythia.
podcast Philomythia, I guess, today. We're going to be more pretentious today.
I think pretentious fits.
It does, yeah. For sure. So, what are we doing, Ian? What's this podcast about?
This podcast is about how much I love stories and tabletop RPGs, and how we're learning to play them currently.
Yeah, it's true.
Even though we've loved them for 30 years practically.
Many long
We're just
decades.
Barely kind of getting into the swing of playing them and understanding how to play them now that we're all adults.
Well, it's kind of funny because I think one of the things is like when you're a teenager, this stuff is really cool, and then you get a little older and it's kind of like all this other stuff comes up and you're like, yeah, that's something I did do, but I don't have time. And now that we're like past like early adulthood, and especially with COVID, you realize, oh no, it's still something that's super cool and
Right.
something I want to spend my time on, and I don't really care if people think it's immature or whatever.
Yeah.
This is just what I want to do.
Absolutely. And this is our journey that we're
Our
sharing with
journey.
you.
And hopefully yours.
Yeah. Hopefully you
Yeah.
take some of this
Yeah.
and you're like, hey, I want to play those games and do that stuff. Finding
Yeah.
a group, though, I mean, we are spoiled with the group that we kind of have right now
Sure. Yeah.
because we've known each other forever and we're all pretty consistent about playing on the day we play, but finding a consistent group is hard.
Yeah, and that's one of the cliches, right?
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
keeping a campaign going, keeping a group going is not the easiest thing in the world.
Yeah.
However, you have tons of online resources, so there's a whole, I'm going to call it classifieds area in
What
like
is this,
Roll20.
1930? The
It is,
classifieds?
yeah. Hey, that's what they call it on Craigslist. If it's good enough for Craigslist, it's good
Craigslist
enough
has-
for me.
I guess it's still following that.
That's what's called classifieds. Like if you want to buy a used car or a PS4,
Right, it's just following
you
that
know.
old formula from the
free
newspaper.
puppies.
Free puppies.
You wanna show dicks to each other. There's a
Oh,
place for
wow.
that.
Is there a place
lonely,
for that?
lonely sexual people. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Why do you think like there's been like the serial killers who've killed people through that? Because there's lonely people who want to touch each other.
Wow.
That sounds terrifying to me.
Yeah, I would never want to.
Yeah.
I don't even like doing online dating. I just it's
Yeah, it's terrifying.
crushing.
It's horrible.
Horrible.
Horrible. It's fucking swiping.
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 Anyway,
Yeah.
let's get out of this
Anyways.
hellish nightmare.
So I feel like there's never. I mean, D&D is super popular. I
Yeah,
would say more
absolutely.
popular. It's becoming like nerd football. I would say.
Other
At
like
this
nerd
point.
NFL.
Yeah, nerd NFL.
Because
for
football
sure.
would be just any of the games, but NFL is the popularized.
Right, popularized. But what I mean is how pervasive it is in the culture. Like this sport that everybody seems to love. D&D specifically is kind of like that, and the NFL for
Right.
sure. And
Because
so
you could
there's
say,
tons
like-
of resources to find people online. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say because you could say like bringing up one that we're looking at lately, Blades in the Dark would be like the college football, a college
Right.
level football, and it's not about
Right.
tier; it's just about popularity. There's a whole group of people that only want to play Blades in the Dark, where they're like, oh, college football, but then there's a lot of people that are all
Right.
about that D&D.
Yeah, and most people statistically are D&Ders first. That's like their gateway, and then they start to look for other things, and kind of like the latest Matthew Colville video. Was it the latest? Yeah, where he's talking about the Warhammer dice mechanics.
Oh yeah, that from like
that
3rd edition or whatever.
Yeah, that guy's complaints about Blades in the Dark, just because Blades in the Dark is a mechanical system, but it's one book and it also is infused with a campaign world, so they're not separate. So that's one thing to know. Just like Pathfinder is the same way. It's an actual campaign setting and a mechanical system, essentially.
Right.
So, but yeah, I'm very excited. We might do some one-shots on here for Blades in the Dark or something.
Oh, we totally should, because that's super funny and awesome.
Yeah. I wonder if you could do solo
absolutely
Blades in the Dark. Well, it's supposed to be a heist, so it's designed to have like a team.
Yeah, well, you could have
crew.
like, you could just have some of the roles be almost flashbacky for like people showing up that he needs when they get to the point where he needs this other person. Like he meets up, like if you're soloing it, you meet up with like NPCs that have those other jobs, and you roll with them as the GM maybe for the same type of things, as they're with each kind of checkpoint or NPC that they come across that, you know.
Sure. You could always do like if I'm GMing, you could do 2 characters and then have 2 be NPCs, I guess, too. And
right. Or like
I mean,
there's so many ways. Just because I mean, I'm not super familiar with Blades yet, but watching the one shot that I'm watching right now makes me like seriously want to just go like literally right now when we're done recording up the road, buy the book Blades in the Dark, and just buy it and be like, absolutely. I want it. Like I have to play this game. It looks so fun. Yeah,
absolutely. But you know, go ahead.
No, I keep going. You please.
There's never been a better time to play RPGs, because if you're like, you know, the cliche is that D&D is about fighting monsters. I don't agree with that, but I can see, combat and fighting giant kind of grotesque creatures is a big part of it. But you got games like 10 Candles where you're this person at the end of the world and everybody knows they're going to die and you're trying to live out like a secret wish. And you've got Symbaroum, and you got Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay and Starfinder, and you've got non-combat RPGs. So there's tons of people to play with who want to play, and tons of games to play. So if D&D isn't your jar of jam, there's plenty of other ones that might suit your fancy.
Yeah.
You know?
I almost feel like my homebrew campaign, like now that I'm like seeing what Blades in the Dark is potentially like, there's almost a part of me that's like, oh, that would have probably really worked with the idea of Forged when I first was making it. Yeah. You know, because they're a squad and you go send out on these missions each time, and there's like an overall plot happening that you can reveal through these things. Like as I'm watching, I'm like, this would have been so much fun to run as a Blades in the Dark. Right.
For sure. Well, you could always still switch it over or incorporate those things. Especially, I would really like to do like a once a month Blades in the Dark campaign.
Yeah, I think
just
that
for
would
fun. Just when we can fit it in, because there's already so much RPG stuff going on. But it's that cool to me. I would really like to do it.
I mean, this is weird that we're talking about this on the podcast.
No, talk about it. Do it. We can always cut it out, but I don't think it's going to be a problem.
What do you think about the idea of, because of everything that's been going on with Sunday campaign and whatnot, turn the Sunday campaign and be like, hey, you guys, do you want to try Blades in the Dark?
I think that would be more realistic if the other players were more experienced in D&D. But I feel like they're so anxious about playing, less so now. But I feel like they're so anxious about playing. If we throw them into another rule system, you're going to reset that.
Yeah, probably.
That stability that they're starting to feel.
That's true.
But
right.
we do need to make some choices because there's some monkey wrenches that got thrown into that campaign. So I'm not opposed to that, but I feel like it'd be better just to play it outside and really get a sense of what the game is on the table, quote unquote, and then see if that's appropriate. See what the learning curve is really like and those kind of things.
Sure.
Because there's one player in specific who's not going to read the book or learn the rules. It's only going to be on table, there's nothing wrong with that, but that means me as a GM, I need to know my shit.
Right, you need to know the mechanics very well so you can express them to someone that doesn't know for sure.
Yeah, and help them learn and all that kind of stuff. Right. But I definitely, Blades in the Dark needs to be in my life. Oh yeah, for sure.
It looks so. Sure. I'm watching, like I've told you, a season of Critical Role right now, and I'm about to just because I still have 10 hours left, and I'm
You're gonna switch.
I'm about to abandon it, here at the end, even though I love it.
Yeah.
To just check out what this Blades in the Dark system is like, and really hear what that is. And I know we're rambling about these game systems and these other things.
No, this is what this is about. We don't have to we have topics, but we can always do them in a different episode. So continue, good sir.
It also is about what we were just talking about, having players, and when you have players that play in your campaign, you do have, as a GM, you need to respect the players and not just drop shit on them all of a sudden out of nowhere and be like, oh, we're not going to play this anymore. I mean, you can't do that.
Yeah, and I do like Matthew Colville's idea that, look, the DM is a player too, but there's a social contract between the DM/GM and the players. And I feel like a lot of times the cliche, archetypal DM will make snap decisions and not include the players in on it, instead of just being like, hey guys, and ladies and in between, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? They're easily solvable by just again sitting down and talking, and that requires a little more forethought on my part. Whoever's running the game, that's their responsibility to steer the ship.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, talking is good, and that's actually one of our topics today too. Not that doesn't have to be a transition, but it ties into the theme of today's podcast.
Yeah, well, tell us what the theme is then.
So, again, this is just, GMing, DMing, what does it mean? How do you get good at it? What does it involve? And, giving our dear listeners, if there are any, that's debatable, but we'll find out. Giving them practical tools and also a conceptual framework to start DMing if they want to make the leap. And this isn't leaping. If you haven't ever been a player and you really just want to DM, my opinion is do that. Just jump into it. You'll fall on your face, but you'll learn a whole lot and you'll get good real fast. So I like to call it communion, which seems a little fancy, but communication and communion come from the same root word, which is about joining together. And I don't have the definitions today. That's one thing I didn't look up. And there's a concept from neuro-linguistic programming which states that the success of your communication lies in the results or the reaction that you get from the communication. So if I, whatever words I use, I go, hey, Ian, how do I get to the store? And you start screaming at me and calling me a racist. My communication probably isn't very good. I'm probably not saying it in a way that's going to get me the results I want. And I feel like role players are better, but we're not always the best at saying things in a way where what we're trying, our intention is actually being communicated.
Right.
We might get caught up in the vernacular or the syntax or the specific words rather than what the DM is trying to say. And so I think that's a good thing to think about, is like, what is the result I'm trying to get from this? Not in a manipulative way, but like, what am I trying to communicate to people at my table? And I found that I didn't, well, the Sunday campaign, speaking of which, there was some drama, and I really feel in retrospective that I didn't explain things well enough to certain players. Like they didn't understand what the game really was.
Right,
They'd never
right.
played a game before, and it really led to a lot of stress for them, which could have been avoided. It was a really good learning experience. We talked through it. We resolved it, which is the only thing you can do at that point. But it was like, oh yeah, that's not really what I wanted to have happen. I didn't want that player to be stressed and worried about losing D&D, quote unquote. So along that line, talking about communication, and again, a lot of communication comes down to listening, right? Just like a lot of playing music with other people comes down to really listening to what's being put out from others.
Right.
First.
Oh, absolutely. That's such a huge part of sounding together.
Yeah.
Is learn to like listen more than you play.
Yeah, absolutely. And you sound better as a musician when you listen more than you play. And I'm a music teacher. I don't think I've said that on the podcast before, but for my students, I have the 60-40 rule, where it's like 40% of your attention should be on you and 60% should be on the other players or the music or whatever you're doing. Really, it should be more, but that's a good place to start, is like put a little more focus out there on others than you put on yourself. And usually it'll be better for everybody, in my experience. So along with that, for DM tools specifically, there's a thing that I call texturing, which is using language to put players, and really yourself too, in the world of the game, where a lot of times, and you're going to do this, you're arguing about mechanics and armor class and how many feet away is this giant bat that's flying down? Oh, it's 50 feet. Okay, it's in range. I can hit it with my firebolt or whatever. And I'm just giving examples. Don't keyboard warrior me like, firebolt is the range is not 50 feet. Yeah, I know. I'm just slow your roll. But, instead
Pretty
of
sure
saying
it's 120.
that... Yeah, there you go. It's way farther. So it's just, okay, that bat is 200 feet away. I can't hit it with firebolt.
Nope.
Right? That kind of thing. Which is important to know if you're doing tactical playing. If you're doing theater of the mind, it gets much more squishy and you have a lot more leeway in how things work. But even if you're being tactical, I think it's really good, instead of, if your PCs are in a dungeon and they're in a hallway, instead of saying, the hallway's 20 feet down and it's 10 feet by 20 feet, being like, you're in kind of this cramped, dank hallway. You hear the sounds of dripping water and the smell of old, dusty mold in the air. Suddenly you start painting a picture or adding texture and depth to your campaign world and to that specific scene for the players and for yourself.
Right.
And so I think it's really good to think about language in terms of immersion, getting the players immersed in what their PCs are doing, rather than how can I take advantage of the rules, which there's nothing wrong with that. That's just my opinion on it. I also think that the GM facing mechanics specifically should be more invisible. So don't be, it should just, like if you're rolling or if you have random tables or whatever you're doing that doesn't involve the PCs, making that really smooth really helps keep the immersion going and not breaking up that, the all glorious game flow.
The continuity.
The continuity.
Yeah.
And we know this. If you're really flowing in a game and it's really awesome, and then suddenly you have to take a break, like right in the middle, like, you know, things are great. It can take like 45 minutes to an hour to get back to that spot.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, it's not instant, you know. So I've definitely been frustrated with certain games, sessions rather, where it's just start stop all night long, and you never really get into it at all. You're just kind of like, okay, well, this is fun, but I didn't feel like I was really playing D&D necessarily.
Well, that's like that continuity break for me.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to when you're playing a game, like homebrew, not homebrew, whatever you're gonna do, consistency to me is pretty crucial.
Right.
And that's not something I really thought of. Like, I used to think of myself as somebody that was just like kind of flow with it, go with it, who cares? And then the more I've learned about it and the more I've seen and heard and read, I'm like, oh, consistency is what pulls you in. That's what makes it feel, going back to what we've also discussed many times, is a dynamic world.
Right.
Where there's consistency within that world. So if we come upon a faction of like pirates, let's say,
mm-hmm.
and they're kind of not friendly pirates, but they're treating us pretty neutrally, and we're good with them. And then out of nowhere, something simple happens, like, oh, I bumped into this one soldier. Now we're being thrown off the boat. From these pretty neutral dudes. They're throwing us off their boat, and they're killing one of our crew, one of our friends, before they throw us off the boat for me bumping into that guy. That breaks continuity for me. That's like, what?
Right.
I hope I hope there's a good explanation somewhere as to why.
Right. And unless, like, you know, you heard rumors or you talked to some NPCs in like a little, let's say, like, you know, beer tent, like on a beach, and they're like, ooh, there's this pirate group, like if you bump into them, they'll murder you. Right. Like, you can prime for that. It's not that you can't have crazy factions, but if it's just out of the blue, that can feel it can feel kind of like a betrayal to the PCs. Right,
because all of a sudden something's happening that was nothing, and that doesn't seem consistent with anything that's going on. And I never knew I would be that way until I started learning about being a GM, and that stuff I stress about when I'm playing is when I'm planning a session, I have all sorts of ideas that I just want to throw at my players, but I'm like, but wait, how does that make a lot of sense to just like, now it's all of a sudden this, that the players, I mean, some players may not even notice, but what about the ones that do? I don't want to break the game for them to focus on them. You have to find a way, again, communication skills, we said it a bunch, a way to work these seemingly crazy things in that makes it still seem consistent.
Yeah. And I think if you have ideas that you're excited about, if you take the time to bake them in or plan them, maybe you're not going to use them immediately, but maybe a few sessions down the line. Right. I feel like you get the opportunity to refine those ideas and make them better. Mm-hmm. Like, if the more I plan and take something and really flesh things out, the more I'm like, that was way better because I spent the time, instead of just, oh, this is this cool idea, let's throw it in there. Ooh, that did not work. That's not what and now there's not like this. Not like this.
4 hours of wasted game time of everybody just, you know, for lack of a better term, arguing for 2-3 hours over something that like didn't even matter. Like, you show up to like encounter something and it was like, oh, that whole conversation you just had, we didn't even need to have it because what we're doing now is totally different than that.
Right.
And
absolutely,
that does happen. But like, if we make a plan and a bunch of stuff happens, and then there's like 2 or 3 sessions where other stuff happens, and then we find out, 4 sessions in, all of that stuff we did in that session 4 sessions ago, it actually didn't matter. That wouldn't bother me as much. Mm-hmm. But what would bother me is if I discover the last 3 hours we just planned in a 5-hour session, so we have 2 hours left to play, that 3 hours was absolutely useless.
Right.
That type of thing is, God, I feel like I'm just bitching. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, this is our soapbox. We get to bitch. We get to do whatever. You can complain away, my friend.
Yeah, it's just there's those things that happen in gaming. Right. And also, I need to say, I've been a GM for only a short amount of time, and I have encountered some things in my game where I felt like I did something and the players didn't like it. And I know the players don't always have to like it, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about something where they felt, they were like, what the hell? That doesn't track, basically. And when that happens, I learn from it, hopefully, and I don't let that happen again, because I want my games to be fun. I want them to be an escape from being stressed out. Like, good game stress is fine, but like being upset,
real world stress is
right. It's not fun to work with that in D&D, and some of those things happen. Yeah, and sometimes you gotta know. Like, sometimes you think something's gonna be really cool, and then it hits the players, and they hate it, even though it seems really cool. And as a DM, you can definitely be like, well, you know what, we're rolling with it, and we're just gonna go. We'll find a way through this. That's how it should work. When something bad happens, sure, work through it, man. Like, you gotta. But hopefully you learn from it and don't let something like that do it again.
Sure. And we should say that you're gonna make these mistakes.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Especially starting out, and you should make mistakes. I feel like you should plan on that being part of your learning process, because those mistakes are what will really teach you the super valuable things that will stick with you, because you're like, ooh, that felt really bad. Don't want that to happen again. And so you have an emotional memory of that thing, for lack of a better term. So we're complaining about things that we've discovered by making mistakes and being in games where it didn't go the way we would like it to go.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
I have a piece of advice that's actually funny, that's translated basically from you. Mm-hmm. This has to do with music from years ago. And I shared this piece of advice with a kid. And I'm going to tell you the last story. So I hadn't seen this kid in years, like 10 years. And he showed up on Facebook or in person. I don't remember what it was. But he goes, dude, I'll never forget that piece of advice you gave me. Mm-hmm. And I was like, huh? What? What did I in my head? I'm thinking, fuck.
Uh-oh.
What did I say to this kid that he now, 10 years later, he still remembers it? Jeez. And he goes, it was about when I was like nervous for a gig. And when he said that, I was like, oh, I bet I know what I said. And he had his first gig. I remember talking to him. He had his first gig that was coming up. And it was like, an original band. And I was like, hey, man, what's up? And he's like, oh, man, I'm real nervous. Mm-hmm. And I go, oh, dude, why? What's up? And he's like, oh, my band has its first show tomorrow night, and I'm real nervous. And I'm like, oh, well, why are you nervous? And he goes, oh, I feel like I'm going to screw up. And I'm like, oh, you are. Don't be nervous about that. You totally are going to.
Yeah.
And he's like, what? And I was like, you're going to screw up, dude. Don't worry about screwing up, because that's going to happen. It always does.
Totally.
Worry about moving on past the mistake. Being like, I know I'm going to fuck up. So when I do fuck up, try to just push through it. Just get through it. Oh, I fucked up. Move on. You got it. Because when you're playing a song and you fuck up, you can't stop on stage and be like, can we start over? You got to just roll with it. And I'm telling you, and this is what I told him. I go, no one's going to know that you messed up, man.
Right.
The more attention you pull because of the mess up is more likely how people will notice. But I'm telling you, man, no one is going to know. And 10 years later, he came up to me and was like, dude, I never forgot that advice. It was so perfect. Like, to not be afraid of making mistakes because you are going to. But yeah, of course. Man, don't. anyone that you listen to or anything, everyone makes mistakes on stage or as the GM or as a DM. It's a learning experience. You're gonna mess up, but embrace those moments, because that's where you're gonna learn. Like you said, that's where it's gonna have that emotional impact, where all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, oh fuck, and just keep going, and you're gonna remember, oh, when that happens, if I keep going, it's a whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just like the way everybody learned to walk and talk, you played around with it, and it wasn't, no parent, at least hopefully, is like, screaming at their, whatever, 1.5-year-old, 2-year-old, to like walk perfectly. Like, that's not. They're like, they take a step and then fall, and everyone's like, yeah, you did it. Like, that's the attitude you should have, is like, yeah, you're going to fall on your face. Then you just get up and you do it again, because you have to do it a whole bunch. So you just get acclimated to those failures, and it feels bad, and then you get up and you realize the world has not ended. And nobody really cares. That seems horrible, but it's really good. Yeah. You don't want people to focus on your failures. That's horrible. Yeah. So just do it.
It's like that old, I don't know if it's some sort of other culture's phrase of wisdom, is the master has tried and failed more than the apprentice has even tried.
Right.
And that's like, oh shit.
Yeah.
That's brutal.
It's kind of like that success is built on a mountain of failure.
Right.
Type idea. Yeah.
Or it's like, how many repetitions does it take for your muscle to learn something? Like 30,000 or some shit?
Yeah, well, there's some debate on whether this is how scientifically valid it is, but it's a really good concept nonetheless, is the 10,000 hours.
That's
rule.
right, 10,000 hours, that's it.
Yeah. Well, you think about the way, learning is really cool. Doing something new is cool because you literally are changing the physical structure of your brain. You have to make new connections in the brain. So it's kind of like alchemy in a way. We never think about it that way, but you're physically changing who you are to accommodate this new knowledge. And then you have to wrap this thing around those cells called myelin, so the information can fire fast enough so you can do the thing good enough. And that takes a lot of time and a lot of repetitions. So, that's literally why somebody who's really good at something can make it look effortless, because they've done it over and over and over and over and over. So yeah, get those reps in, bras and
get it
sisses.
Get it in. I just have to say this, I'm sweating.
You're sweating, huh?
I'm sweating
Too warm?
right now.
Too toasty?
I don't know, man. Maybe it's because I've been drinking whiskey.
Oh, that's probably part of it. Yeah. So, that's good. Any other thoughts on that?
Oh, man, I have a million thoughts, man. Millions of thoughts. Billions, possibly.
Billions. Nice.
I don't really understand numbers. I can't count past 3.
Can't count past 2.
2. No.
So this whole communication thing, I think we've talked about this before, but that is the GM's job. That is your skill set. There's other things that are adjacent, but you're really talking and saying things, and then along with this texturing idea, presenting things in a real and dynamic way, which ties into what Ian was saying, which is consistency. Like describing things in a way that makes sense and feels real, and then making notes of that, so if they encounter that NPC or that environment or that whatever, it's going to be attached to the last time.
Right.
In some way. It's going to feel like the same character or the same area, that kind of thing.
You just said something a second ago that I kind of want to latch on to and bring this up, because we've had this kind of thought, and I want to see if you want to talk about that.
Sure.
You said the GM's job, or something that the GM needs to be good at, is communication.
Yeah.
So that leads me to the idea of, what if you could get like a PhD or like a master's degree or like some sort of degree in game mastering or dungeon mastering? Like, what would that look like? What would the classes you need to have? Like, what type of real world classes would you take, or even not classes that we know of?
Right.
In order to get that degree? And let's just start out with
Sure.
like a master's degree. You know,
Yeah,
not
sure.
a PhD, not a doctorate in GMing yet. Let's go with just a master's degree.
Although a doctorate in Dr. DM would be pretty
That
cool.
would
but
well,
yes,
we can
yeah,
tackle
yeah.
that, you know, as we
Right.
continue.
Right. But, you know, a master's in dungeon mastering has a nice ring to it
Right.
as well. So, I'm so glad you asked. This is another topic that I made notes for. I'm so glad. That was a great transition.
Yeah, I thought you'd like
well,
that.
I would say the first thing, again, I don't know what the undergraduate would be.
I don't know anything about education like that, so we're gonna just pretend.
We're just going to pretend.
This
we're
is
just,
our
we're
fantasy.
Just, yeah, we're just saying, okay, if we had to make this thing, what would we do? And you listeners can point out what we missed.
Yeah, and tell
you
us.
can point
that-
out the failures,
yeah.
and we can be like, you know what, that is a really good
You
point.
got a
we
point
totally brushed over it. Didn't think about it.
And now
So
you're
I would
blocked.
say, yeah,
Blocked.
now you're blocked. We're not listening to you ever again because we don't like.
I
having
hope
that
it was
pointed
worth
out.
it.
Just kidding. We're not.
Yeah,
gonna do
I'm
that.
just joking.
Yeah. So I would say the first thing is table time, and that is,
Really, table time is like number one.
well, you have to do the thing.
I agree.
If you're going to get a master's in DMing, you have to be actively involved in it, just like a doctor has a residency.
Absolutely.
They're still going to school, but that I would say, and getting 1,000 hours of table time is probably.
Oh, I think it
good
needs
thing.
to be way more than that.
Well,
For the
again, we're not talking
masters.
doctorate. For
I know
the
we're
masters,
talking masters, so 1,000 hours gaming, like I've almost hit, you know, on our Roll20 tables,
right?
numbers like
not
that.
Planning, not
Right.
planning.
That's what I mean. Like
Only playing.
that's what I'm saying. Before I was a GM, my number was still
Right.
pretty high as a player, and you
Right.
could knock a little bit of it off just from staying logged in for a little too long accidentally. But I'm still saying, I think like for a master's degree, as far as like game time, I'd want to say 2,400 hours.
Well, let's do the math. So let's say you never took a week off. So you do 4 hours of average of a game is generally going to be 4 hours. Sometimes shorter, sometimes longer. 4 seems to be the sweet spot. So 4
Let's say-
times 52.
Well, let's say that, you know, let's say for a regular person trying to do their job, let's say you get to do 16 hours a week based on, so you get to do, you actually game time 4 hours 4 times a week, because that seems more possible rather than be like, oh, 7 days a week, 4 hours. That seems extreme.
So I was just saying once a week.
Oh, once a week. That's
Yeah, just like, because most people have a regular weekly game.
so that'd be like 16 hours a month.
Yeah, so I was just doing it yearly. So
Okay.
so how many weeks are in a year? Is it 52, 56?
52.
52. So let's say 4 times 52.
That works.
And
okay.
most people are going to take off numerous
Holidays.
weeks in there. So we're
Right.
saying you're not taking off any weeks.
Right.
You're playing every week.
Well,
That's
it's-
only 208 hours.
Oosh. So
So if you're playing multiple games, you could double that. But that's
Okay.
still only 416. So doing table time in that way, which is the average, that would take you a couple years.
yeah, and I think though, but that like would, how long does a master's degree take? Like,
Well, you have depends upon the degree, but you have the undergraduate, which getting a bachelor's is typically 4 years. And then it can be anywhere from another 2 to another 4 years to get that next degree. Somewhere around there. Like if you're a doctor, it's way longer.
well, master's
lawyer, it's
degree,
really
and
long.
on average, a master's degree takes 1.5 to 2 years, is what this is
Yeah,
saying.
okay.
For full-time students.
Right, full time. So again, if you're only running one game, that's really about part time as far as just how much time it's going to take to prep. So if you're getting a real master's, you're probably going to have to run more than one game. But I would
Right.
just say again, this isn't judging. Okay, this is how much you have to play per week.
Right.
This is the amount of time you need to have to when you're graduating. That's what I would say, but we can knock it up. That's just like way more like, especially if it's like 2. Let's say you have 2 years.
Well, I think that if you
Like-
did it to like 1,200 hours, then that
Okay.
would make sense
12?
for like a good standard, like maybe 3-year degree type thing for a master's in this. And that puts you at like
just expertise. It's not, you don't know every nook and cranny, but you're very competent at this point.
Absolutely. And I think that
Yeah.
that puts you on average 2 to 3 games a week.
Right.
At certain times, sometimes you might not have any. So that puts you at about 2.5 years to get that much table time with an average kind of in there.
And I'll say this is that for about 6 months I ran a game and a half, so it was one game every week and then one game every other week, and that was really stressful. It's a lot of work. So 3 games a week every week.
It's hard.
If you don't have the experience and you can't fall back on anything, you don't have any tables you've made or homebrew monsters, it's going to be a full-time thing.
Oh, that's going to be rough.
So I would say 3 times a week is not realistic for most people, but once a week, and then starting there and then building on it would be more realistic.
Fine. We'll go with your 1,000. We'll go with your 1,000.
Well, no, I think 1,200 is great, but maybe say, okay, for this thing, because there's no master, you can't go to college and get a master's in dungeon mastering, but for our little Philomythia university thing, we'll say it's 5 years. So you have more time, so you can do a once a week type of thing. You can take more time and still live your life. Again, it's hypothetical.
Right.
So that would be my first thing is table time. Like, you have to have on the ground experience. Just like if you're a musician, you got to go play gigs, man. Whatever that is, in the orchestra, in the bars. And if you really like it, you're going to want to do it more than once a week. And you'll find out, you might be like, you know what? I hate this planning. I just want to play. I just want to be a player, and that's totally respectable. So that would be, I think, ground, 0 level. That's the foundation. And then the next is the reading list. And I already have built a reading list. Again, what I did to construct this reading list is I took the reading lists from the 3 little brown books. I think it's in the second book. And then all the editions of D&D, their reading list, and I put it in a spreadsheet. So I am not going to read through this, but it's got a bunch of great fiction that was integral to the formation of the formation of D&D, like Jack Vance's work, which is where we get Vancian magic. If you don't know what Vancian magic is, it's the idea that spells are living things, or they're kind of like these demonic entities, and wizards specialize in holding these entities in their heads, and when they cast a spell, the entity is expelled and the spell effect happens, and then they don't know the spell anymore. So it's not a true Vancian system in 5th edition, but we still use spell slots to represent you can only do so much magic in a day. Like, you can't do it forever, right? So it's got a lot of fiction, but then there's like some really cool fat books on like game design. There's a book we'll talk about in a little bit called Hamlet's Hit Points, which is kind of reading a session and reading a story in terms of the emotional pitch and quality to the session. And then I just put ones on there that I've read that I thought were really good. So like Dune is a really good book to read. Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, which won the what's the big prize they give out?
The Pulitzer?
No, not the Pulitzer. The Nobel.
The Grammys?
Nobel Prize in economics for just how cognition works. The Golden Bough. Learn. I think like The Magician's Companion, which is like ceremonial magic. It has a bunch of tables on like how things are related. So if you want to incorporate more symbolism into your books, those are great. Stranger in a Strange Land, things like that. So I put some ones on there. So I would think there would be a reading list of things that, okay, within these 5 years, you got to read all these books, because you want to know, and this leads into the subjects you would take. You want to know the history, I think, of D&D, where it came from. What is the perspective that the people who created the game and really were integral to the formation of the game had on it. So that would be the next thing, I would think. What are you doing?
What?
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 You sweating?
I'm
so
definitely
what do you
sweating, bro. I'm staying
Nice.
sweaty over here. I'm seriously
stay
sweating.
sweaty? Well, we're living up to our catchphrase. What about you? What do you think?
See, I feel like as we're planning this, you're like setting up all the, like, for lack of a better term, the shitty classes that people are like, oh man, I gotta go to fucking D&D history, man.
Yeah.
And then I gotta go get my tabletop time in. And I'm like, well, I think that you would need definitely some sort of geographical type classes to, like, learn about map making and how cities are structured, or how geography. I've been wondering what this subject is, so if anyone ever listens to this and you can tell me what it is, that'd be great. But the subject that deals with how land masses are formed and how rivers come to be, and why is it basic understanding of weather patterns, and why, like world building type classes. And then on top of that, I definitely would think, like, you need acting classes or improv classes at the very least, in order to build upon those skills of communication. I also think that I think you should learn a foreign language, just one, more if you want, just to understand the idea of when two different cultures try to communicate, the different language is like, this one's set up like this. So when they learn the other language, it gives you just more to add depth to the D&Ds that the worlds that you create, the encounters you create, history for sure.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying like hardcore into these. I'm just saying, a good semester, 2-semester class in some of these things to give you a good understanding of basic principles that guide these things.
Right. And because you're not trying to get a master's in geography or history. You're trying to get enough of this to inspire your own world building,
yes, exactly,
and your own understanding of what's going to be believable and consistent in a world, whether it's your homebrew or whether it's a module. I mean, that's why, for instance, I like Jim Davis so much, because he got a master's in history. So his grasp of how history works and all the forces involved is very deep.
Right.
And so it's cool to hear that perspective. Same thing with Matthew Colville. He has a huge history in game design. So a lot of times when he talks about the game, he comes from more of, okay, how can we make this game really snap?
Right.
And so, yeah, I would say acting, improvisation, history, geography, and also basic math and statistics.
I was going to say like some sort of statistics class, even if it's just basic statistics, or I don't even know how that works. A psychology class of some sort.
Yeah. Yep. Obviously, you could do a communications class.
Right. Or like even a philosophy type class that doesn't need to be, that's more geared in like a general, like glossing over a lot of different ideas in philosophy. Not trying to like, if there's one that you like a lot, then sure, delve in. But having these general, it's almost like having this master's degree would have almost like a pretty high general quality to it. But that mixed with game time and multiple different types of games, along with these skills, you could have a really interesting degree.
Yeah. And I would say that the twist for this is that you're not going to treat it like a physical school, like you're going to college or anything. Your classes could consist of, like, history could be like the Hardcore History podcast.
There you go.
And philosophy could be philosophize this. So you're using modern tools of the internet. Because in my opinion, the internet is school. That's where everybody's getting their education, for better or worse now.
Right.
That's where, especially the younger kids, that's where they're learning everything about the world pretty much.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So capitalize on the positive things on that. So it doesn't have to be like a boring class with pop quizzes and that kind of thing. This is because, again, the focus is on becoming a good DM. And if you listen to this and you're like, ooh, that's really cool, can you give us more specifics? I'm happy to write lists and like make more of an outline. But again, this is just a thought experiment. So I think that's good. And again, statistics, and I know hardly anything, but I've gotten more and more interested in it because of D&D. And I was talking to one of my buddies who I actually saw in person. It was weird. It's the first person I've hung out with in like 2 years in like person. It was very strange. Awesome, but I was like, wow, you're actually here in person, not behind a screen.
Oh, yeah.
That's weird.
If any of you are listening to this in the future, the pandemic is still huge right now.
Yeah, still big. But I was like, if I had to make an argument for public schools, like why you should have D&D, it's like, look, it teaches you acting, it teaches you communication. You have to be able to schedule a bunch of humans to meet at the same time. You have to know basic math. You're going to learn English. There's all these things that you can start to get excited about through D&D. So the idea is not to be like you have to do this and you have to do this. It's more learn about the world through D&D. Like get excited about more things through D&D. Let it be a doorway into the real world, quote unquote, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah.
And
I think that
with stats, I mean, it's more knowing how does this apply to D&D. Like, for instance, knowing if you make a D6 table with just one D6, all the numbers have the same amount percentage of being rolled upon. So 6 is going to come up just as likely as a 1. But if you have 2 D6, you have this nice bell curve, and the numbers in the middle are going to come up more than the numbers on the end. So 2 and 12 are not going to come up as much. So if you're making like a random encounter table, put your crazy monsters on the end. I think we talked about that in one of the previous episodes. But that's the kind of things. It's like know the personality of these different statistics and how you can use them in your game.
Right.
So you're learning practical, associative information for you to be a better DM. That's what it's really about, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's the one. I mean, again, it's like that. There's that meme that we were talking about the other day where it says if you're doing a death save and you roll a 10, that should be a fail. If it's supposed to be 50-50. But my brain keeps going, no, it isn't. That'd be a 10 would still be a success.
Well, it's right. It's right underneath 50-50.
Right.
So, but the thing is that I'm pretty sure that's intentional because they want it to be a little easier. The designers don't want the players to die as much. So they make it a little easier.
Just that one little percentage tick.
Just a little. Well, it's 5% more.
There you go, 5.
So it's 55% chance that you're going to roll and live.
So yeah, and like, so having a basic understanding of that type of mathematical stuff is beneficial for designing worlds and whatnot, because you're like, oh, I want it to be this amount of percentage chance that this happens, then oh, if I want that, I make them roll 64. Right.
Especially if you want to design your own mechanical system. Like you want to do something other than D20, it's really helpful to know, well, if I roll this kind of dice, it's going to give me these kind of averages. So it just informs your choices a lot more, for sure. What about projects and campaigns? Should we say, like, if you're getting a master's, you need to have, like, one fully fleshed out homebrew campaign world? Is there like a live streaming actual play project? That seems to be a big part of masters and doctorates, is like you get more focused into, oh, I'm doing this specific thing. I'm doing research into this. I'm building this campaign world, and I'm going to have people playing it or something like that. Big homebrew world. Most DMs have one that's kind of their magnum opus. They might do more, but you kind of have your main squeeze. It seems like a no-brainer to me.
Right.
And there might be DMs who are like, nope, I don't want to do that. That's fine. Maybe find a different project to work on, something that's more suited to your needs, but some kind of big thing that's going to get you to graduate. That's going to be the thing that your centerpiece, essentially.
Right.
I would think.
Something like that. I think that like you need to be able to present competency in the creation of a world, and I also think you need to show competency in doing an instructed world, if you will, like one that's already made, and you're what was that? A scripted one? What the fucking word?
That's just a campaign module.
Modules. Like you have to be able to prove competency with a module.
Yeah.
And then there's even part of me that would be like, you also need to display competency in almost like a performance type class or a performance type thing with
improvisation,
something that shows that you, like this project you do at the end needs to contain all of these competency requirements in order to obtain.
Yeah, absolutely. And that the improvisation thing might frighten some people. Again, it's not going to be the main thing, but it's good. It's really good to work on that, like we were talking about in the previous episode. Being able to react to things in the moment is a skill that you can work better, and it's just about finding a way for that not to be so unbearably uncomfortable. Just enough so you're like, I'm totally embarrassed, but I don't want to end my life.
Right.
Now.
Well, it's like I'm totally embarrassed, but I'm okay with it. I'm okay where I'm in, because you're in a place where you can, especially if you feel competent in it. And I guess what comes from that is just doing it a lot. Like
table time, man.
Right. Yeah. Well, improv, I'm going to delve into that a little bit. Me and you definitely have a long history of improv, whether it was music or when we were in school together. Improv, or really being outside of yourself, in a sense, was something that we had to do all the time back then.
Right.
And
I will say this. Improv still makes me uncomfortable.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, I still have a lot of anxiety, but I understand it, and I can use that tool in my sessions and campaign settings.
Well, it's interesting. The whole idea of improv and all this stuff, or acting, is to kind of hide the real. And here's an example of that. As we grew up, me and Eric together, I always looked at Eric as this like fearless guy that was not afraid to be himself in front of anything. And I always looked at him and I was like, God, I wish I was more like that. So that I strived to be that way. And then as time goes on and we've known each other for so long, we're in our 30s, and I tell him, hey man, you've been this is how I feel about that. And he looks at me, he's like, are you kidding me? None of that's real. That's how I am doing. And it like shocked my brain. I was like, wow, the perception of, like, again, acting, doing, like, committing to these moments, because it's not like always, you know what I mean? It's these certain moments where I would be like, oh man, he's so funny. I wish I had that type of, what's the word I'm looking for?
I don't know.
Right. Just your skill in being improvisational and fearless.
Being comfortable.
Right. It seemed to me like you were super comfortable in it is really the thing I'm saying. And you said, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
People don't know that you're not comfortable if you pretend that you're comfortable.
It's true. Yeah, a lot of it is, you can call it pretense or you're pretending. I like the term presentation, which is really what performance is you're showing a certain aspect to viewers or your players or whatever,
Right.
and it may have nothing to do with what's going on internally. You may be like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. I've had plenty of times where starting up, the session for the night, and I want to throw up because I'm so anxious.
100%.
But nobody knows. Nobody has any idea.
Not. Well, that's interesting you say that. There's many comedians, or at least one in specific that I'm thinking of, that talks about he'll be on stage and this audience is dying laughing, but inside, he's not happy. But he's still doing, so it's, again, a performance. All of this stuff relates to things, and being a game master, a dungeon master, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to stop saying that from now on. I'm just going to start saying, I'm not going to commit.
Master.
Never mind.
Just cut out the first word and just say master. Being a master. Bader.
Whoa.
What?
Calm down.
What?
Master Bates. His name's Master Bates.
That's such a funny show.
Dude, I think that is, I'm dating myself, even in the fact that movie's even before my time.
Right.
So the fact that I know it, dude, Richard Pryor.
Super funny.
So funny, dude.
And that for the listeners, that's the Richard Pryor movie, The Toy.
Yeah. And I was such a young kid when I saw that. So a lot of the jokes that everyone else was laughing at, I didn't get.
I didn't like that show when I was young, but I'd watch it because I was bored. We had it. And when I think back to it, I'm like, ha! Oh my God, that's so funny.
Oh, I loved a lot of it. I loved so much of it. I thought Richard Pryor, I thought he was so funny.
Right.
I loved it. It was so good. But regardless, performance would definitely be a high qualifier in being a good, not a good. You don't have to have that to be a good one, but to be one that's presented with a master's degree.
Right.
You would want that.
Masters meaning you're well-rounded. You have a sense of the history of the game and all the aspects that encompass it. You don't have to, it's kind of a misnomer because you don't have to have mastery in every area.
Yeah, right.
You don't have
we can discuss that for the
masters in
PhD.
statistics and ironically though, the PhD is more focused.
That's
you kind of
funny,
laser in on but this is more like I've got a good competency in all the areas that D&D involves, which is a lot of areas.
Would you say that one of the classes you could take some sort of, it could be just lumped in with improv or acting, but like a voice acting class?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think Critical Role has shown how successful that's like peanut butter and jelly, voice acting. I've started looking up courses on YouTube and people because I'm like, this seems really valuable, and I found a ton of cool information.
Dude,
about the perspective on that.
Can I tell you something kind of weird about that? Is
Sure.
I have a friend that's on my team where I work, and he, ever since I've known him, man, like when he first got on my team, he said that he wants to be a voice actor. And when he said that, I dismissed it at first, thinking that's weird. And then as I got to know him a little bit, he kind of introduced me to this world of like, oh, wait. Yeah,
that's a thing.
The voice actors, like there's so many of them that do voices that I love.
That you love, yeah.
And they do so many of them, and it's like, oh, wow. Yep. I honestly apologized to the universe, and I even said something to him that I honestly didn't think it was a thing until he said that, and now I'm like, oh, dude, that's cool. I'm stoked for you to try and be that. Like, that's really cool. Yeah. And he's thrown a few because he practices other voices and manipulates things, and he one of my favorite video games is Metal Gear, right? And he busts out this Solid Snake voice that is so good. Like,
nice.
While we were in person, I would tell him all the time, I go, do the voice, dude, do the voice. And he'd be like, Otacon. And I was like, oh, you sound like it, dude. It's so funny. So I'd tell him to say stupid shit in the snake voice, and it was so good. Oh, I loved it. Regardless, but yeah,
I felt the same way about like voice acting. Always seemed kind of like this. Oh, if you can't make it as an actor, I guess you can do this, but that's completely false. Because we all have like shows where there's voices that you love.
Oh,
like, you're like, oh man, that's so good.
That
and a
voice
lot of that is crossed
them.
over too. Yeah, there's a lot of actors who also do voice acting and stuff, but it's a it's a discipline. It's legitimate, and I think now again with Critical Role, it's made it more like, oh yeah, this is something that's legitimate to just the everyday public. Probably not for everybody,
right.
But I think for a lot of people, where like back in the 90s, that was a weirdo thing to do. Like if someone's like, oh yeah, I want to be a voice actor, you'd be like, okay, like,
well, even
good luck with that, which is sad to say. I feel like a dick saying that now, but that was the perception, and I don't feel that way anymore.
I want to like definitely delve into this thing for a moment, talking about that. Is when I was first introduced to Critical Role, wasn't into it. I've tried, didn't like it, but then eventually I started to really appreciate it a bit more. And one of the things, I think you've even said it too, is one of the things I love Critical Role for is bringing tabletop RPGs or D&D to the front of kind of nerd, quote unquote, culture, the culture of being nerdy, which is kind of a mainstream thing almost. I love the fact that D&D is now respected like it should have been when we were younger, because when we were kids, man, the fact that we liked D&D was an offense. Like it was like voice acting, like, you're gonna do what? You're
playing what? Okay.
D&D?
Well, in Utah specifically, the Satanic Panic was still echoing in that in the chamber that is. We both grew up in Utah.
Right, we grew up in Utah County, Utah, which is like deep in the heart of Utah.
Yeah, deep in the heart of Mormon country. And so there was a lot of people where they still thought it was satanic, like deep into the 90s. And one thing I want to say is, like, there's a lot of talk about like girls and other people not being accepted. We would have loved it.
Oh, are you
if
serious?
Other people would have wanted to play with us. Nobody wanted to fucking play that shit.
Like boys, girls, we wouldn't have cared. And I think that's something that you're starting to see a lot more now in gaming and stuff, is that's accepted now. And when I see people that are shocked by that, I'm like, are you serious, dude? First of all, like watching actual play or people I know, as a kid growing up doing this stuff, getting to see girls wanting to be like part of it, I'm like, that's the coolest thing ever to me. Like seeing people, regardless of anything, get into it makes me excited. Yeah, because it was such a it was such a desert when we were younger of this. Totally, such a desert. And you go to the game shop and it was just like a bunch of like old white dudes who were pissed. Oh yeah, it was, God damn it! It was scary.
Can't there be another store? I don't want to go to the store, but there's no other stores. God damn it!
And so I love that. Like, it's some of my favorite stuff ever. Like, and this is gonna sound stupid, but and I'm gonna probably paint a target or people are gonna be mad, but man, girls that are into anything that they're into, just like guys, bring this whole element that the other side doesn't have, and it fills it out. It makes it so good. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've seen girls doing DMing where I'm like, holy shit, this is awesome. And obviously I have the same reaction for when dudes are DMing and they do really, I'm like, holy shit, this is awesome. Right. But it's being young and like growing up in the idea, and like nerds like we were back then, it wasn't common back then for girls to be around that.
I didn't know a single girl
who
wanted to do that.
It fills my heart with joy to see that now. It's like, oh, that's so cool. I love that.
It's really interesting. Again, I don't know why this keeps coming up, but it's the sauce of the day is the Sunday campaign. there were 3. I was DMing, Ian was playing, and then there were 3 female players.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting for me as a DM to see how they would solve problems, because you know, on the Friday campaign, it's all dudes.
It's all dudes.
And we call it the Conan campaign, not because we're playing Conan, but because it's like smash things with heavy objects. Like
it's just about fuck shit up. And
pull your
like,
dick out and break down that brick wall.
Show these monsters who's bigger.
Yeah.
And we do that to the NPCs too. Like I can't tell you how many characters have been harassed by my character.
Yeah. Ian likes to play jerks.
They're not jerks. They're jerks.
They're lovable rakes. Is that more
that's
acceptable?
People love my characters because he's kind of a jerk, but at the same time he does what's necessary, and it's always modeled after me a little bit, like. But that's what really happens in your characters.
Yeah, that's characters. You're expressing different aspects of yourself. You know, like
absolutely.
My current character in the Conan campaign is actually a female, half drow, half orc, and she's like my favorite character ever.
Yeah,
like
she's
it
great.
Fills this need. She's a rogue, and it just fills this need. Like, I friggin' love rogues. I love her so much.
Oh, and Eric's so fucked because he brings this character into the campaign, and then like almost obviously not on purpose, but forces me to pay him money to join the group.
It was a lot too.
It was
like,
a lot of gold.
Keep raising it.
Go
Come
higher.
on.
It was like, holy shit! I don't even remember how much it was. It was like 10,000 gold or something. And you got half then, and then half later. And,
well, I've got half of the half so far. You still haven't paid me the other half.
But yeah, I had to pay him. And speaking of this, I want to like delve into another. Sorry if we've jumped around for you, but
no, you're good. I've got the notes up. I'll bring us back. You're good.
There's all like in the games we play, you know, the threat of death or characters dying. People are always kind of nervous about that, and it's this whole thing of death saves, and people's characters I know have been in games where they've died, but there's been extenuating circumstances where they didn't die because of something that was going on. And what's funny is, I don't know if anyone really thinks about this within the whole gamut of all the players we play with in our circle, that I'm the only one that has a character that has died.
Yeah.
Like,
I've thought about
I was
that.
killed, and to me, I'm like, y'all need to have one of your characters fucking die.
Yeah.
Like,
for sure. I've been really like sensitive about that, but more and more I'm like, I think it's okay.
Right.
Like, I want to have a character die, and I want to kill off some characters just to like get over that.
Right, because it's a weird thing, because we kind of brought me back in a different way, but I mean, when you really look at it, my new character, if I could go back, I would just say, let's kill him, and this is the new guy.
Just let it lie.
Right, but I made a cool story and a fun little thing for the campaign we were in, because I thought it was interesting. But what I didn't account for when I did this, because I planned it with the GM, I didn't account for the other players and what their reaction to my character dying was going to be, regardless of whether they could bring him back or not.
Right.
And I love the players I play with on Friday. We all come from an acting school, so people commit to their characters pretty severely sometimes. And it created not a fracture, but a break in the group where some of the party left due to their relationship with the character that died. That was a problem for them, and they weren't okay with it, and they left, and other players had their own internal thing, and they left, and it was, having a character dies, it's scary at first, but dude, just let it happen, because if you love playing these games, you love stories, you'll make a new character and you'll love the new character. You will.
And once you get into it, you're going to keep coming up with ideas for like, ooh, I can make this character, and this character, and the problem is not going to be your character dying. It's going to be, when am I going to be able to play this character? Like, I've got like 20 character concepts I want to do right now.
Right.
So once you get the ball rolling, having that supply is not going to be an issue, I think.
Absolutely.
You know?
And it just comes again, it's that learning curve. Like when you first start, you're all excited and you don't want your character to die and you have all these dreams and aspirations, and that's awesome. Do that. You need to do that. But also keep in mind they might die. And if they do, it's okay. Just roll in your character. Okay. You'll have another, like the next one you make, I promise you're going to either love it, or as you play it, and hopefully your GM's cool, and you can just be like, hey, I hate this character. Can we,
will you please kill him?
Kill him so I can make a new one. Sure, dude, let's kill him. All right.
Right.
Cool.
Right. And really, I mean, the sky's the limit, especially for your DMing style. Like, if a character dies and the party really wants to bring that character back, you can make a whole campaign out of them going to save that character's soul, and you can have the player whose character died make a new character and go on the quest, and they go descend into hell or go to whatever plane the soul is on, and you can get really good gameplay out of that one thing that may have come from just a really bad dice roll. Like that with Ian's character, it was just like, the DM rolled really high, and he's gone. It
was fucked. Our characters all of a sudden encountered a portal to a god.
Nothing to do with what we were doing.
No, and it was just like, hey, here's a portal. And
we trust the DM.
Yeah,
Let's
we
go
trust
in there.
you. What's going on? We go in there, and then it's like, this is your nightmare, and now you can't leave. And it's like,
and you can't use your spells.
Now everything's fucked, and we're like, why?
What's happening?
Yeah, my thought was like, let's pretend we walked in here. I want to know what your plan was. Was your plan for us to walk in and then just see this thing and go, well, see ya, and just leave? Was that the plan? Why would you create this whole thing for us like that? Unless we were going to fight it. Like, unless we're going to do something with it. So we walk in, and it fucks us. Mm-hmm. Like,
I thought my character was going to die too.
I did too. Thanksgiving dinner is like about to be served, right? You're about to eat this. We've been planning it. We had this really cool idea. We were super stoked. And so this whole Thanksgiving dinner of this extreme encounter we're about to do.
Delicious. It smells great.
And we're all like, yeah, this is going to be sick. We're going to do this. And then it falls apart into it's like someone walked in the room and just took a shit in their hands and wiped it all over Thanksgiving dinner, and it was like, eat that, bitch.
And then they're like, by the way, there's C4 in the turkey. Have fun disarming that, you fuckers. And then they ran out of the house.
Or they're like, something in this room triggers the C4, and you don't know what it is. It could be one of you standing up, for all you know.
And it could be you sitting down, like not getting up.
It could already be, and then they leave the room and you're like, well, shit. So then we all start desperately trying to do something, and my character just happened to get caught in some bullshit. It was a disintegration ray, and it went bloop, and it hit me with like 92 damage, and I had 81 or some shit. And it was like, if this kills the person, they're disintegrated and they're gone. And so everyone just kind of sat there and was like, wait, what? Yeah, he's gone.
And that's where we end tonight's session.
That's the end of tonight's session. Oh, cool. That was fun. We just walked in here, and now we're just getting... All right.
It was a nice little surprise.
Welcome. You're dead now.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. But... Yeah. It did lead to a lot of the whole thing was brutal.
It was super brutal.
And then it led to a lot of really fun stuff that's happened since then.
I'm super glad because of that, my character, his relationship with Ian's character, he literally walked off into the darkness. Like, it was super traumatizing. So I made a new character, and I love the new character.
Right, that's the new one. She's great.
Yeah. Her name is Switch.
Right, and my character has been replaced through his turn of events with, it's his same soul, it's his same kind of personality, but in a new body, in this different being that sacrificed itself for my character to come back, due to us being like Avengers basically, and the gods need us to like finish out this quest. So now I'm no longer a druid, which I was. Now I'm a warlock, sorcerer, multi-class.
Yeah.
That's
Now,
absurd. Like this, my character is one of those kind of characters that you're like, wow, that's fucked. Yeah, I know. But it's fun, man.
That.
We play in the Conan campaign, like he's saying, and the goal of the Conan campaign is to fuck.
Yep.
Everything.
Yep.
It's to be a sweaty. You gotta like.
Gotta stay sweaty.
I'm telling you, like I researched how this character came forward, why they are the way they are, and they are not to be trifled with. It's technically what people call the coffee lock is what I've got, but I'm not abusing it like the whole coffee lock situation, because we don't
Why did they call it the coffee lock?
I don't know why they call it the coffee lock. Alls I know is that the reason they call it the coffee lock is because when you're a warlock, a short rest restores your spell slots. As a sorcerer, you can use spell slots to do.
Right.
So you can have the sorcery points to fuck around with spell slots. So in certain game modes, it's overpowered because you can short rest, and now all of a sudden I have extra sorcery points where I can refuel myself in ways.
So basically, it's the magical equivalent of just pounding coffee. Like, I'm fucking ready. Let's do this.
Right, but we don't, in our campaign, we don't use short rests enough for that to become like something that I can really take advantage of. It's not.
We don't even do downtime. I think like 2 sessions ago was the first time we really had like kind of a downtimey, like, hey, let's just hang out in this city.
Right. Well, that city now is a nightmare. But my point is,
burn it to the ground. Burn it to the ground.
You know, I don't know what my point is. I'm talking about D&D, whatever.
Talking about D&D. Well, we were talking about character death and how that's good, and then we got into
and then I got the new guy, and he's a bastard, and I've done some.
He's like Bastard 2.0.
Oh yeah, but he's like, he's not a jerk openly anymore. He's a jerk by being a super manipulative dick. Yeah. And my charisma's stupid high.
Yeah.
Because in my backstory, I used something because our GM approved this. He probably doesn't remember it, but he did. One of the items I took for creating a high-level character was this book. I don't remember what it's called. But when your character is able to use this book, it will increase your charisma by like 2.
Is that where you read it for a certain amount of time and then it stops being magical? I know exactly what you're talking about.
But it increases your charisma by +2. Even if it's already at 20, it allows it to go to 22. So I have that. So my charisma is 22. So it's a +6.
Yeah.
And I'm a warlock. So everything I use is based on that. I'm also the sorcerer, is like this dragon ancestry for cold, so I get to add any spell that I use that's cold, I get to add damage to it. But then since I took a meta magic, it allows me to change the element of any of my spells to cold, so I can use sorcery points to add 6 to any of the spells that I'm casting.
And what's your total level too, you should say?
18.
Yeah, so it's total level between the two classes is 18. If you don't know what that means, don't worry about it, but it's fucking
I think he's
powerful.
a level 6 warlock and a level 14 sorcerer.
Oh, so your base is sorcerer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the sorcerer was what the character was when they sacrificed themselves to those gods and said, I'll go. And that's when they supplant him with the warlock version of my character now.
Now, is the original body's soul, is that completely gone, or does he pop up and like scream at you in your head sometimes?
No, see, if we played a campaign where that was something, I would say that because his physical shift was only slight, so he looks a little bit like my old character, but he still looks like that guy. If we were to go to places where he would be recognized, it would be like, oh shit, that's that guy. And
right,
he
but
wasn't.
like do you hear him speaking in your head? He's gone.
He went to the next plane.
Okay. So he died for all intents and purposes.
Right, exactly.
And you replaced him.
Because his family was already up in.
Bro, that's body snatching.
Yeah,
that's an evil act.
And then
It's
my
not good.
character went and got a tattoo. That's a magical tattoo on his skin that's allows him to have an armor class of 18. But he can't wear any armor. So.
Right.
That's what his armor has been, is just this tattoo, and it can't get any stronger than just 18. That's his armor class.
Right.
But that's what was funny about to me with what was going on in this most recent encounter was, first of all, my sword is a pact blade, so he can't take my pact blade from me. It can't be taken. Secondly,
that came in handy too.
Right. And
last few
secondly,
sessions.
and that's also my spell focus, so you can't and then my tattoo is my armor class, so you literally only thing that can stop me from being who I am is something that takes away magic. That's the only thing that can stop me.
Yeah.
So
For sure.
I thought that was a funny little interaction for the guards when they were like, take his sword, and I shoved it in the ground and they took
Right.
it and it just disappeared, and I'm like, where's my sword? It's
Yeah.
stupid.
For sure.
I definitely
So-
egged on those guards a bit. But and see, here's the other thing about, never mind.
No, go ahead.
No, like
Say it.
what happened is I wasn't even involved. Like what went on had nothing to do with me, and I was still like, really?
Yeah.
That
It's true.
is
Definitely true.
crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. And
Indeed.
I will burn Yardar. Eventually,
to the ground.
once this Storm King's Thunder, like this story is done, anything is up for grabs now. I don't care if my character dies. I finish the story. I don't give a shit. I will kill every Lord's Alliance and Yak Folk piece of shit on Faerun. You're all going to suffer my wrath. I don't care. Fuck you.
And it's okay, listeners, if you don't know why he hates Yak folk, but they attacked us unprovoked. Let's just say
Let's
that.
just say that.
Yeah.
That's a simplistic version of it, but
Yeah.
they fucked with us, and it was dumb, and it was just like the Lord's Alliance. Some shit went down. We were like, yo, what's happening? All of you are condemned forever.
It was a left turn for sure. It was a left turn. So, that's a little info on our
lives.
our lives and campaigns.
Hope it was fun.
So, getting back to the degree, so some kind of project campaign, something. It seems like the go-to is going to be like a homebrew world. That's like your ongoing project. But if that's not what you want to do, maybe it's something else. And then I would say the next thing is repertoire. So like having encounters that you can just, kind of like a musician has certain licks. You have like certain monsters, like if you need something quick, you have these encounters. And again, this ties into your table time. So as you run things, you have things on hand. So you know how a goblin encounter is going to run, or you really like this certain type of aberration. You can throw it in there and how it's going to react to the players.
I feel like that ties into the final project having to be something. It
has to be something
that shows competency in the field of improv in the game.
Right.
And so like so to me, I mean, this would be kind of brutal. Part of the final project might be you have to like live stream or record like a 3 to 4 session situation that you show each one of those. Like there's certain, let's call them, what do they call it in acting, that you have to hit marks. Certain marks you have to hit, and how you hit those is up to you.
Right.
But that would be just for that final project that you have to submit for your master's degree. You would show that competency in you'd have to be able to show the competency in these random table situations.
Yeah, random tables, encounters, and
like having a few battle maps prepared, having like showing competency in that level of being a game master, because you see people, and I mean, going into this, going to show like people, because there's groups I'm in like that have game masters that advertise their skills for money. Like, I'll run your game for you. It costs this much, but how can you have competency? Like, how can you feel that they're competent in doing that? But if there was like a literal,
here's the things you should expect from your professional DM.
Right. And that this master's, like, they're like, oh, I've got a master's in game mastering. You're like, oh shit, I know that guy has had to pass this thing. And you'd only know this because you play games and you know about this degree because of it.
Right.
You go, oh, I know that this guy has to do this, 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 and this in order to do it. So like, we could literally be like, yeah, we want to play this campaign, and this is how we want to do it. And he'd be like, I got you. And he would be able to nail that shit out and keep it legit for you. And you'd trust in that because he's got a master's in gaming.
And I think
game mastering.
Too, game mastering. A master's in game mastering, yeah. I think, too, I mean, it's a great resume builder. Now, professional DMing is very controversial. Some people are very opposed to it.
Absolutely.
Some people are really for it. We're not going to debate that.
Right.
So, but just if that's something you want to do, it's a great resume builder. Like if you have your website, you can be like, look, I've done this, I have these things. It's a way for you to also show what you can do and what players can expect.
Right. Absolutely.
If that's something you're interested in. So,
well, because I think that's a player expectancy, or what a player would expect, managing that as a game master and as a player. If there was this person that had this degree, as a player, your expectancy of what he has to offer, he or she, could have to offer, you'd be like, oh, this person is going to be able to do this. Like you would trust in that, knowing what they had to go through to get it, physical beatings.
Right. Whippings.
Flagellation,
the pool cue, pool ball in the sock.
The cue ball in the sock.
Cue ball in the sock.
Or the just bars of soap, like in
bars of soap, change. Whatever works, and you don't get any bonus to your AC for that. That's
just a sock
world.
full of dice. D4s.
Oh, there you go. That's appropriate right there.
Just like, how many D4s need to be in there? You put 10 for each year that you're in the program. Each year.
And you have it's a specially made sock that's like a dice bag but really long.
No, it'd have to be just a thin garment. And it's all metal dice. D4s.
Nice. Ooh.
And like they beat you with them. And they get to swing at you 5 times for every year in the program, and your hands are manacled above you. You can move around as much as you can try, but they get to just swing at you 5 times for every year to prove your commitment.
And you have to recite the intro to the DMG as they whip you.
And then you have to recite random mottos.
Monster stats?
No, random mottos from different cultures and different things.
Nice. And you got to make sure you're not biased, so you got to like hit all the different.
You have to hit a few. Yeah, have to hit a few.
Have to hit a few. Yeah. Sounds good. I think this is going to be a very inclusive and accepting.
And they can hit you wherever they want
course.
with that sock of Doom.
Wherever they want.
Wherever they want. And it's, I mean, if you've been in the program for 5 years, just because you've been taking your sweet time, that's 50 metal D4s in that sack.
I mean, we're just trying to motivate you to finish quicker. That's
and if it's 5 times per year, they get to swing at you 25 times with that sock. You might die. Like, that could kill you.
But you get a cool tattoo. If you do get it to 25, you get the reach 25.
Dude, you will be covered in scars from that. There will be no room for tattoos. You'll be just rife with wounds.
That's your resume right there. You're like, just look at my scars.
Look at me. I'm covered in D4
5 years,
scars.
bro. 5 years, guys. Okay. So.
Or they use like, you know, those pitching machines, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The ones that shoot the ball at, like, let's say 96 miles per hour.
God,
but what they do is it's a huge tank of just D4s, metal D4s, and they just drop them in there and they just fly out like.
Oh, you're gonna lose an eye.
You're gonna hurt.
Teeth.
It's gonna hit you in places.
That's gonna puncture you for sure.
It's gonna.
I feel the need to say we are completely joking. That is horrible.
It's awesome.
That's why we're saying it, is because it's terrible.
It's terrible.
This isn't actually part of the master's degree.
Yeah,
I feel like some people might be like, "Are they serious?"
No,
we're not serious.
Never serious ever. If we're saying something and you're like, "That's crazy," well, it's because we're joking.
Yeah, we know it's crazy. We're being silly.
We're leaning into that crazy.
And once you take your beatings, though,
there's a ceremony.
There is a ceremony. I think the next thing is system mastery, which means how well do you know the system that you're running. And again, it could be just a master's degree, and it could be system agnostic. So it could be like, maybe you really want it to be, you really love Blades in the Dark, or Symbaroum, or Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, or 10 Candles, or whatever it is. You can adapt this learning system to that. But how well do you know the system? And again, a lot of this ties into table time. So if you run the game a lot, you will get a mastery over the system. You will build encounters. And so for me, it always goes back to the doing of the thing.
Right. Absolutely.
Is how you really be, how it's all, that's the foundation of it.
Just do it.
Yeah. Just do it, because that will necessitate, like, I need to build this random table. What kind of, should I do 2d6? Should I do a 1d20? Should I do a 1d100? Should I do a 3d10, which I guess people are big fans of, And
at first
all
I was
that kind of stuff.
I was really a big fan, like, when I started doing my own homebrew, like, weapons and stuff. I was like, ooh, a lot of D4s. That's a fun table. Like, that's a fun damage table, because it can get, like, if you do like 6 D4s, that can be some rough damage or some nothing damage.
Right.
And it's got like a pretty, it seems, I mean, I don't know the stats behind it, but I've played with the rolls just by doing it a bunch. And I've really liked it. But then when I've started learning about Blades in the Dark, I've started playing with like smaller D6 pools for damages and stuff. And I'm like, oh, that creates something that's more consistent, yet has a variable to it. It's like, oh, that can hit pretty low, but it will generally hit this.
Yeah. And there is a site called anydice.com. I believe it might be .org, but I believe it's .com, that will actually show you the bell curves. You can type in like what die pool you want to have, and it'll show you what the averages are for every number. So you don't necessarily have to do all this from scratch. And that's, again, the internet, in my opinion, is school, and it's your resource for all these things, which should be obvious, but people don't really seem to think about it that way very often. So I think that's a good chunk right there. I think that's kind of like, that's a good rough draft of like, okay, what would be involved? And of course, you're not really going to get beat with dice. This doesn't really exist, so this is you doing it on your own. So really, you'd have to whip yourself with dice, which self-flagellation seems even
Just a
worse.
sock
somehow.
of just, you don't really increase them.
I
it's
will
just,
be a master.
Right.
I will. You know, so.
you definitely need to
Um,
jump off of like a 15-foot building and hit the ground to understand that that D6 damage when you hit the
Right.
ground.
You need to
do
understand viscerally and make sure you do like a belly flop.
that. Yeah, you have to hit that ground solid.
Yeah.
Not on your don't land on your feet. That's stupid.
Do not do that. We disadvise. Do not
if
jump
you
off
do
a
that,
building.
That's natural selection. You shouldn't do that.
You're on our advice. We're saying don't do that, but it's really funny to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let us know what you think in the Dooblydoo, or no, the Dooblydoo is where we put our stuff
Stop
in the
that.
comments.
That's.
Hey, Ian.
I know.
Dooblydoo, bro. That is what it's called. I'm going to use the name.
I
because
know
that's what
you're
it's
gonna
called.
do that.
Yeah, I know.
Well, let's.
What?
Oh man,
What were you going to say? What?
I got so much to say. Always, you know that.
So much to say. Well, I was going to change topics, but if you have things to say.
I thought we were signing off.
Oh, no. I mean, we can.
I thought that was a good point to be like, hey.
I mean,
Like,
we
we're
can
done.
sign off for sure. For sure. Do you feel like that's a good place to stop?
I do.
Okay. Well, we're gonna sign off, and we'll turn all the copious amounts of notes, I always have too many, into the next episode.
Well, yeah, this is just a continual
thing.
Stay tuned to listen to
so-
the next one. Binge it. Fuck
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, I mean, in a very loving way.
Right.
So, listeners, let us know what you think. Maybe you think it's complete bullshit. To do
Yeah,
this.
if we're
That's
garbage,
dumb.
you could tell us.
You are garbage people living on a garbage island. That's fine.
Drown yourselves
Yeah.
for your opinions.
Yeah.
I could,
But let
okay.
us know. Let us know in the comments what you think. You can also email us at. I'm forgetting the name of the podcast right now. I'm having a brain fart. Yeah, Philomythia at gmail.com. You can hit us up. We do not have a website or anything right now. We're just on YouTube.
Tell Jerry you
We're
love his
on that thing.
music because it's
Tell
great.
Jerry you love his music. He's got tons of awesome stuff.
He's making a website soon.
He's making a website, so we will let you know what that is.
That'll probably be changed in the credits and stuff already, but this is when we know about
but
it.
we'll still talk about it. We're gonna talk about Jerry and his music when we do our music episode.
But we're
as
gonna
well.
bring him on here, right?
Yeah, we can. That's a great idea.
I think
for
we
sure.
should bring a few of our friends on here.
Bring some guests on.
Yeah, just to be
Yeah.
like, hey, this is a person we know from this game we play.
Regale us with your
Tell
thoughts.
us what's it like to play with me and Eric, because
Right.
me and Eric together is again, we've known each other for a long time, so we do well with each other.
Right. And we can also cause nightmarish.
We also steamroll the shit out of everybody
Yeah.
because
for sure.
we're big and tough.
I'm big and tough. So let us know what you think.
Yeah.
Like, whether you love it or hate it, we're interested. You're going to think of stuff. I mean, the internet's going to have lots more thoughts than any one or two personages
if you have, like, questions
alone.
that you want
Let
us
us
to
know.
answer because
Or
you're wondering
things you want us to talk about.
Yeah, because
too.
you're like, hey, I wonder about this. Say, hey, I'm wondering
Yeah.
about this. And if we don't even know, we'll be like, hey, we'll check that out and see what we come up with, and we'll come
We'll
back
talk
with
about
you.
it. Yeah.
We love it. And
Yeah. for
maybe
sure.
one day one of you will be on here to chat with us. Who knows?
Maybe you will. And if you try some of these things out, let us know what happens. Like, again, fail, success.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, it's all good. So we love you. And
you say it. You say it.
You want me to say it?
Yeah, you say it.
Stay sweaty.
Stay sweaty, everybody.
Stay sweaty. This has been a Polymuse creative production. Music was provided by Jerry Stenquist. To check his music out, go to soundcloud.com/Jerry-Stenquist. Until next time, roll high and take a point of inspiration. Like, share, subscribe.